Welcome into It's Just Wrestling. I'm Russ Joy. Thanks for joining me for another week as we look at the biggest stories in WWE, AEW, and anywhere else. There is a lot going on this week. I went back, I did a little bit of reflection on last week's show, and I was like, all right, there were some negatives that I got into, especially with AEW. There were a lot of positives that I got to, mostly around Penta, and we dove into the breaking news about WWE and TNA's partnership, and I thought about it a little bit. I went, all right, I'm going to be an open mind in the week that follows. And I said, all right, if anything big happens on SmackDown, we'll get there. Something big did happen on SmackDown. We're going to certainly get to that in a little bit. And I said, if anything big happens on Raw, we're obviously going to get to Raw. And a bunch of big things happen on Raw. And then I again, open mind. I want to see AEW succeed because I've been supporting them since day one. And I thought, all right, if there's a chance that AEW is going to do something well on Wednesday, we're going to highlight it. And in fact, they did multiple things that will garner my attention in a very, very positive way. So if today is a day that you need a little bit of positivity, dare I say some, where's it at on the screen? There it is, some joy in your life, I'm here for you because there were a lot of interesting things that happened across WWE and AEW the past week. Legitimately. And I'm going to throw these up on the screen because it seems like it's just a good thing to do. It's a helpful visual, goes a very long way as we work through this show. And as we continue to build this show together, we're going to build this thing bigger than you could ever imagine. And it continues to grow week in and week out. And so, my friends, I want to start with what I thought was the biggest takeaway from SmackDown a week ago. Now, in fairness, we do this show every Thursday. And so previewing SmackDown isn't something I'm really interested in doing. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to say, all right, let's go back 6 days. But we're going to, for our purposes today, because, we got something that yours truly is very interested in. We finally got a moment where Jacob Fatu got to get on the mic. Not one of the backstage segments where he's walking to the ring, where he's walking in the background with the I love you Solo, which we love. We love those. They're great segments. But this is the first time we got to really listen to Jacob Fatu as he drilled down on what is to come. Now, segment starts off with Solo Sikoa in the ring. We haven't seen Solo. We haven't heard from Solo since losing Tribal Combat on the debut of Raw on Netflix. Because again, I don't know if you know this or not, but Raw is now on Netflix. Eventually, that's going to get old. But for right now, we're just going to keep noting it every time. As long as they keep noting that it's Raw on Netflix, we'll call it Raw on Netflix because branding is apparently very important. So, okay. Now, Solo Sikoa goes out. He utters nary a word. There is nothing to come out of Solo Sikoa's mouth that makes you think he's about to acknowledge Roman Reigns, which is what he said he would do if he lost Tribal Combat. He doesn't really acknowledge either Tama Tonga or Jacob Fatu. There's nothing that really happens. He just leaves the ring. Now, he looks studly. He looks like Studley Dudley, right? He goes out there in the red jacket, and you say to yourself, this is going to be the moment. Is he going to renege on what he said, on his promise, on his guarantee to acknowledging Roman Reigns? Will it happen? And the answer, of course, is no, or at least not yet. He neither reneges on what he said, nor does he acknowledge Roman outright. He just leaves, which leads to Jacob Fatu, who I will argue from now until I'm blue in the face, is the most interesting non-main event guy they have right now. That is not to say that I think that Jacob Fatu is not a main event guy. I very much believe if you put Jacob Fatu across the ring from Gunther, I think you'd have a hell of a match and you'd have a hell of a program. And that guy would probably do better on the mic than what Jey Uso's not doing it for me. The Jey Uso Gunther thing, we're going to get to that later. But Jacob Fatu, you put him up against Gunther, he looks like a legit champ. He looks like a legitimate threat. You put him across the ring from Cody Rhodes, looks like a legit champ. You could put him up against just about anybody. Oh, and by the way, they've kind of planted the seeds. They've laid the groundwork of what would a Braun Breaker versus Jacob Fatu look like. Oh, I'm very intrigued. I don't necessarily need to see Jacob Fatu going after the Intercontinental Championship or the U.S. Championship. I don't need that. I think Jacob Fatu's a main event guy. And in fact, I'd say he's more main event than Jey Uso. And I would certainly say that if you're going to continue the Bloodline story, which kind of seems to be in a bit of flux right now, given the fact that The Rock may or may not be involved going forward, given the fact that Solo lost and they kind of killed off the new Bloodline push, or at least they put it on ice. I'm here for Jacob Fatu. And the promo that he cut, by the way, didn't feel like one of the pre-rehearsed, reading it within your mind, going word for word. It felt very off the cuff. Tells the audience, shut the hell up! The voice cracks. Jacob Fatu tells you that the worst, what is to come, is going to be even more impactful than anything you've seen to this point. And all of a sudden, I go on over to Twitter, and I'm taking a look at where people tend to be very negative. And for the most part, I see people saying, oh, that guy was allowed to cook. And cook he did. Now, was he Walter White level of cooking? I don't know. But I would certainly strap a massive rocket. He's a big boy. He moves very gracefully. But I'd put a giant rocket on his back. Might have to call up Elon. Might have to get one of them from SpaceX, one of the ones that comes back down to Earth. Because listen, if you're going to put the rocket on him, right, eventually he's going to have to come back down. And maybe get embraced by whatever the hell they call that thing at SpaceX that catches the booster. Getting myself distracted, but you get it. Jacob Fatu looked like a legitimate star. I can't wait to see where this goes. I assume that we're going to hear more about it on SmackDown on Friday, but that was the number one story for me that came out of SmackDown last week. It is the most intriguing thing, and as many of you are aware at this point, I am not the biggest Cody Rhodes believer, and I think that the sooner they can get him in an actual program with a threat, the better. And I would say that Jacob Fatu would represent a hell of a threat. Now, where do you go storyline-wise from there? If Jacob Fatu were to win the championship from Cody Rhodes, does that then turn into Roman versus Fatu? Because I'm more interested in that than I was in Roman versus Solo. If Fatu makes it known, if he were to win a championship, or if he were to line up across from Roman Reigns, where does Solo Sikoa's loyalties lie? Does he back a guy that he hand-selected to be part of his bloodline? Or does he acknowledge Roman Reigns as tribal chief and turn his back on Fatu and Tama Tonga and Tongaloa? Are there more Samoans on the horizon? Yes, there are. Are there more Samoans on the horizon who could side with Fatu? Is now Fatu the leader of the new bloodline? I have a lot of questions, and the beauty of the segment is that because Solo didn't really give you an indication either way, it opens up the possibilities even more. This was chef's kiss. Picture perfect. Big supporter here of Jacob Fatu and everything that he does on SmackDown. So that's very exciting. I was happy about that. Now, that to me was the only thing that I really, really loved from SmackDown, that I was very into. And now we're going to flip over to Raw. We're going to go Raw, and then we're going to go Dynamite, and then we'll see if there's anything else of note in the world of pro wrestling. Hint, there are. Actually, let's get to one of those things really quick. News came out that apparently Ricky Starks has asked for his release from AEW. That has been shot down. Reportedly, he has been told, no, you cannot have your release. He appears to be planning on taking more indie dates to stay relevant, to get some in-ring reps, to keep his name out there. Can't blame him. There are now rumors swirling about Malachi Black going back to WWE as Aleister Black. We'll get to that and the fallout of that, which was addressed, surprisingly enough, on Dynamite. Miro perhaps could show up at the Royal Rumble. A lot of guys whose names are out there. Rey Fenix's name will be out there from the time he is finally let go from AEW, or that contract runs out, to when he pretty much inevitably shows up in WWE. You think about the amount of talent right now that could be making the jump from AEW to WWE, or are still under contract and are just awaiting those contracts to run out. There's so much talent, and I keep coming back to this now. Like, there was a time where Tony Khan went on the spending spree and got a bunch of former WWE talent, brought them into the company, and then it kind of disrupted some of the flow of what some of their stories were. And inevitably, it ran into a place where none of these guys felt like they were either booked well or creatively, or there was a breakdown in trust between the owner and the talent themselves. But like, if you were to allow for this mass influx of talent to leave AEW and go to WWE, does that then lead to disgruntled employees on the other side that then come back? One would think there's a chance, although if Tony Khan is now holding on to talent the way that Vince McMahon used to, seems kind of unlikely that the WWE is now going to let good talent out of their contracts early to go make the jump the other way. The counterpoint to that, I guess, is that WWE could, in theory, use their partnership with TNA. And if you were to have a disgruntled mid-card play, let's say a Chad Gable, I think he's going to remain a mainstay on WWE programming, but could you envision a scenario where Chad Gable is now sent to TNA and is now competing for the TNA World Championship? Maybe. How the talent react to that, I don't know. Could WWE talent allow for their contracts to run out and then head to AEW? Is that still greener pastures to somebody who believes they could wind up back in WWE's main event scene or in the mid-card? Do they now all of a sudden believe, you know what, if I go and I build my stock back up with TNA as part of this partnership, I have an easier path to getting back in the WWE system? It's possible. I think that's going to be the thing. You know, we a couple weeks ago we were talking about like projections and predictions for 2025. I think that might be the thing I'm the most interested in. What do disgruntled or underwhelming or underutilized talent in WWE ultimately choose to do? Like, what is going to be... Okay, back out on this a little bit. Back up. What do you do if you're a WWE talent who's not being used on weekly episodic TV, whether it's SmackDown or Raw? If NXT is truly developmental and the partnership between WWE and TNA implies that NXT and TNA are somewhat on the same level, or that's where the talent exchange is going to happen. If you're somebody who believes you should be on Raw or SmackDown, and there have been, like say you're a Sheamus or something, do you want to go to NXT? Probably not, because it's viewed as being developmental. Now, you'll do what is asked of you because you're getting a nice paycheck. But if you're like a Sheamus, do you say, hey, I'd rather make the jump to NXT and go work with a bunch of people I haven't worked with before, tear that place up, maybe end up in the world title picture, and then you have a much easier path and you're still under WWE contract, and a year from now, you've built your stock up to a point where they find a better place for you, a better positioning for you on SmackDown or Raw. Injuries happen all the time. You're still in the pipeline. I really do wonder, is that going to change the landscape? Instead of a disgruntled talent wanting to leave for AEW, do they stay under the umbrella and try to make their way over to TNA, still collect their WWE paycheck, but set themselves up for a quicker transition back to the company they want to work for? I don't know. I will be interested to see what happens. Remains to be seen. Now, I'm going to go back over to some WWE programming, most notably one of the better Raws that I can remember. Now, in fairness, not this past Monday, but the Monday before that Penta debuted in San Jose. That was a very strong show. I would argue that a lot of the on-the-mic moments in this show were arguably even more notable. I'm going to take you first over to a little moment shared in the ring between longtime friends and also rivals, and Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. Why am I taking you there first? Because it wasn't cognitive dissonance, right? This was a promo that in theory makes sense, and in a vacuum makes a ton of sense. Kevin Owens trying to build up his buddy Sami Zayn, except you're in this weird gray area, and I see what they're doing, and I really do like it, and I appreciate the thought that went into it. You have Sami Zayn, who declares himself for the Royal Rumble, believes he's going to win the Royal Rumble, wants to main event a WrestleMania, wants to win a world title, hasn't done it yet. Kevin Owens is there carrying the Winged Eagle title, a title that on commentary, Michael Cole says he stole from Cody Rhodes. Kevin Owens, who has been truly a truth teller, a soothsayer, if you will. He's been one beacon of truth on the show. No matter what he said, he has been accurate. The way that he's called out Cody Rhodes for betraying, in a sense, the rest of the locker room by siding with Roman Reigns, wrestling with Roman Reigns, taking his side, despite everything that Roman and the Bloodline had put him through. Kevin Owens has largely been right. That's why you've seen that Kevin was right. We did have the moment, I guess it was last week, where he had, instead of the son of a plumber, it was like the son of a service worker, electrical service worker, something like that. Fantastic. The Canadian dream. It was great. It was a great moment. Cody went off in the crowd, ran after him. That actually was a notable thing from SmackDown. I'm not going back. We're not redoing the SmackDown segment. We're not undoing all of that. But Owens shows up and he cuts what's essentially a babyface promo, building up his best friend Sami Zayn and saying, like, look, I forgive you. Like, I understand now. You forgave me. You forgave Roman. It's just in your nature. And I know that you're going to win the Royal Rumble. And essentially tells Sami, like, I'll help you win the Royal Rumble. But there's also this implication at the end of the promo where he says, and I know that when I fight for the title, when I'm going up against Cody Rhodes in this ladder match on Saturday main event, I know you'll be there for me if I need your help. And now all of a sudden, you're put in this very interesting predicament. As a fan, if you believe that Kevin Owens has been telling the truth and that Cody was actually kind of the heel in the whole situation by taking Roman's side and battling the new bloodline with him, well, then you might look at this and say, well, Kevin Owens is really a babyface. And in fairness, good guy backing good guy is all good stuff. If you believe that Kevin Owens is a heel, which many of the people in attendance at Raw seem to believe, well, then this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why is he cutting a babyface promo and boosting up Sami Zayn? Now there are questions, though. Would Sami Zayn betray Cody Rhodes? Clearly, Cody believes he can believe in Sami, but he's got his best friend, Kevin Owens, saying, I forgive you, and essentially saying, I'm willing to help you if you will help me. I mean, there's a path here, right, to Kevin Owens wins the world title. It won't happen, but Kevin Owens wins the world title in this ladder match against Cody Rhodes, and he helps Sami Zayn win the Royal Rumble, and those two get to main event a WrestleMania together. It's pretty great. The question is Sami Zayn ready to turn heel? Is Sami Zayn ready to betray Cody Rhodes? And so you are left with more questions than answers. Again, another very nice storyline plot point. And this also comes back around later because Sami Zayn has a face-to-face with Seth Rollins where it appears they are also on the same side, which is kind of anti-Roman, but they have a decent understanding among the two of them that they kind of have each other's back. Sort of. Kind of. They're certainly not at odds. They know that they're going to have to face each other in the Royal Rumble, but there's a mutual respect. Okay. We're going to keep it going because there's somebody else who's going to be in the Royal Rumble. And there's somebody who made headlines because of something that he said in his moment on camera. We watched CM Punk come out to the ring, through the crowd, through the back, through the arena, in through the people. This was a great angle, by the way. This was very cool. CM Punk up in the crowd, and he says he's going to eliminate everybody. He says, John Cena, I don't see John Cena throwing me over the top rope. Great moment. But the best line is if you put Hulk Hogan in front of me, I'll throw his dusty ass over the top rope, and I'll kill Hulkamania once and for all. Good God, man. CM Punk just unloads on Hulk Hogan. Woo! Now, is there going to be a payoff? Let me tell you something, brother. I remember, dude, in the Royal Rumble 2025, brother, 150,000 Hulkamaniacs, brother. It was me and Punk left in the ring, brother, and I threw him over the top rope, over the barricade, and actually out of the building, brother. That's what I did. And then I went on to main event WrestleMania, brother, where I beat Gunther 1, 2, 3, brother. And I took out Cody Rhodes 1, 2, 3, brother, and became the undisputed champion, brother. And then Brock Lesnar came out, and I sent him back to Saskatchewan, brother. That's what I did. Somewhere in Hulk Hogan's head, he already has that ready for himself for months down the line. But no. Are we going to see a payoff of Hulk Hogan and CM Punk in the Royal Rumble? Absolutely not. How does Hulk... Okay, people don't... I get it. A lot of people don't like Hulk Hogan. There's a lot of baggage there. I get it. I'm not going to stand here. I'm not going to stand here and say, "Who? Got to feel bad for Hulk Hogan." The guy's not moving well. All right? He's just not moving well. We all saw the debut of Raw on Netflix. He had a hard time getting in from the back. Guy's body is beat to hell. There is no chance Hulk Hogan is making it to the ring unless he's like the number 5 entrant and they like give him a couple of benches on the way to like take a break. Unless the Undertaker gives him the motorcycle for him to run. He's not making it out to the ring. So no, Hulk Hogan will not be in the Royal Rumble. Now, if he is, boy, that'd be interesting. How the hell are you going to safely get Hulk Hogan over the top rope? I mean, it would be a pretty cool payoff. Could CM Punk be one of the last 3 or last 4? And then the music hits and Hulk Hogan comes out and costs CM Punk? That'd be really fun, except there's no way to pay it off because you're never going to have a CM Punk Hulk Hogan match. Makes no sense. So, okay. It was a great line. Punk once again establishes that he's going to win the Royal Rumble. So you have... Listen, you think about the top stars that are going to be in that match, and it is an embarrassment of riches. You've got Drew, Seth, Punk, Sami. You have all these guys, these top stars, who very much look as though they're going to have a legitimate claim to winning the Royal Rumble. And it just adds another layer of complexity where we have been able to say, you have more questions than answers, but not in a bad way. Like, not in a plot hole sort of way. It's just there are so many possibilities, and it's kind of hard to tell who's going to end up walking away with the shot at the main event at WrestleMania. So that's another very big positive. Now, another big positive from Raw. I told you, it's a very positive show today. Penta and Pete Dunne. Now, I didn't like this match as much as I did when Penta took on Chad Gable. I think that overall, Gable was better to get, was the better option to get a good, solid, strong match out of Penta. This one didn't pop as much for me, but I decided that I'm going to use one of the small human beings running around my house to kind of give me just a very base level understanding of Penta's star power and how Penta appeals to a different audience. I myself am not an 8-year-old child. So I went to my son and I said, hey, sit down. I'm going to put wrestling on for a second. We don't usually let the kids watch wrestling. It's rare. Sometimes a pay-per-view match. Sometimes. Very rarely, though. And I said, hey, I want you to tell me what you think of this guy when he comes out to the ring. And then he's like, all right, well, if I like him, can I watch the match? I said, all right, that's fine. So Penta comes out. Now, I'm pretty sure that my kids, at least my two oldest, have seen Penta and Rey Fenix. They saw a Lucha Bros match. I am almost positive they have seen the Lucha Bros and at least one Lucha Bros versus Young Bucks match from AEW. But I digress. Penta comes out. My son is enthralled. My 8-year-old son is like, this guy is awesome. I have to watch his match. Now, like 2 minutes before, he was like, I don't know if I really want to watch a match, Dad. Wrestling's not really my thing. He likes the story around it. He likes the entrances, but doesn't like the violent part of it. I don't know what to make of that, but it's not his thing. Anyway, he sees Penta come out, and he's like, oh, I need to watch this guy. Like, I need to watch him. He is the coolest person on the show. Now, I had been fast-forwarding, so, like, we saw different segments with different guys, right? But when Penta came on TV, he was glued. And that entire match glazed over. He was locked in. This is probably like what I imagine my parents saw, like when I was a little kid and I watched Goldberg come out through all the pyro and blow the smoke out of his nose. And I thought it was the coolest thing to ever happen. Or when I saw Sting come out of the rafters, the way that I was just entranced. That was my 8-year-old. So I can tell you, at least from one small human, he thought Penta was the greatest thing ever and thought that Penta was the coolest guy he's ever seen. So that was a really cool moment because it kind of confirms that this isn't just the WWE audience very clearly pays attention to AEW and they watched all the AEW matches. No. I said this last week. The people who don't live on the internet might not have known who Penta was. There is a portion of the audience who didn't watch AEW who probably did look and say, all right, who's Penta? Saw Lucha Underground, saw some TNA, certainly saw some AEW, probably saw Rey Fenix and said, who the hell is that? And boy, are they going to be in for a surprise when Phoenix gets there. But Penta has an aura to him. He does have star power to him. He's got a unique look, I know Punk hates this phrase, but a unique moveset. Like, the guy has something special about him. And by the way, just in monitoring how last week's show did across the regular show, clips, short-form content, the stuff with Penta is what really popped. There is something very special going on with Penta. God, when Phoenix gets there, I don't know how they're going to play it. I don't know if they're going to tag together. I don't know if it's going to be a brother versus brother program. I have no idea. But good for Penta, man. It is very cool. So that was another big positive coming out of the show. And I think that was about where I left it. The main event between Rollins and McIntyre was fine. I had no issues with it. The big takeaway there, if you're just looking for, something to kind of hang on to, it's that in that final few moments, Rollins is in the corner. It was McIntyre and Rollins are in there. Sami Zayn accidentally haluva kicks Rollins. And so now you feel like there's additional buildup between Rollins and Zayn. I didn't mean to hit you. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. It's going to be a whole thing. So again, more questions than answers. Ton of different ways that this could go. Very exciting stuff. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't keep this positivity train going, because, man, Dynamite was really good. At least the first hour was really, really good. And there were some moments on the show that, they kind of dipped. But if you're looking for something to just say, I just want to remember a little bit what it felt like to love early AEW. Like when you go back, if you have Max and you've gone back and watched any of the first year shows, and you're like, I miss that. I miss that feeling. I genuinely hate whenever on AEW program they say, we've got to restore the feeling. I hate it. Because all you're doing is acknowledging to the fans who are aware of what's been said online, the online discourse, that the show isn't as good as it used to be and that the crowds aren't as hot as they used to be and the crowds aren't as big as they used to be. I imagine that probably a heavier portion of the AEW audience is more online than the WWE audiences about their own shows. But when you keep going out of your way to note that, like, things aren't as good as they used to be, even a week ago, like when MJF said Jeff Jarrett is the last face to see before your favorite company dies, it kind of like acknowledges in a way that him having TV time is a sign that things are they're like spiraling the drain, right? So I'm not always a big fan of it, and they do end up saying restore the feeling in the opening segment. But the thing that really, really just had to capture your attention, if you are truly a pro wrestling fan, and if you're looking for that kind of, I don't know if it's a nostalgia pop to go back to, what really wasn't that long ago, 2019 or even 2021, well out of the pandemic or well out of the pandemic restrictions, the thing that should have you the most excited was this. The opening segment that included Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and the Don Callis family was nothing short of exceptional. Now, you might not like the idea of like the concession stand brawl sort of thing that this ended up becoming, but my God, it was a fantastic start to the show. Genuinely, it was one of the most exciting, entertaining, unpredictable starts to a Dynamite show we have seen in a long time. And the first thing that stood out, and I was so glad that we got the payoff, Dynamite has gone back to this idea, and they weren't able to execute it last year because I assume they had the buildings booked out for a year, but they have finally gone with this idea of booking smaller venues that have packed crowds, that sound better, that look better, and that the venues look unique. And so they were in Knoxville, Tennessee for the show last night, and the first thing I thought to myself when I saw it was, they have this lighting rig, right? And it's got these kind of open pillar setups. Always reminds me of the final WCW Nitro in Panama City, where they had that. It was the lighting rig, but it was the 4 open pillars. I think about that. I think about like Shane McMahon climbing up one of those and diving off. Like I think Jeff Hardy did as well. It doesn't matter. I saw that and I was like, all right, like why? Why is that needed inside? Do they not have a normal light setup inside of this venue? And we got to see why. Oh, I mean, at least in part, a spot from one of the pillars. This was a great start to the show. You get Tony Schiavone in the ring in a role that I think he is perfectly suited for, being the guy to lend some immediate credibility to your show, introducing Omega, introducing Ospreay. Ospreay calls out Omega, essentially, right? And tries to tell him that he's sorry about everything that has happened between the two. And all I kept thinking to myself as this was unfolding was, how do we pivot out of what I was a little bit disappointed with a week ago when Omega first came back and he gets jumped by the Don Callis family, and then last week we see Ospreay come out to the ring to try to help Kenny, but they're both left laying, and you have the full Don Callis family like, listen, I support wholeheartedly the idea that you need to have strong heels, and seeing the Don Callis family, right? Put away the baggage, put away the probable missed opportunities and bad booking around Lance Archer and Brian Cage, and just look at those two plus Fletcher, who you were building up as this proto-star, right? You've got him, and you have Takeshita, who I'm a big fan of, big Takeshita fan right here. You put those 4 together with this absolutely hateable heel manager and Don Callis, they should at some point be the guys left standing. But last week I went, all right, like you kind of killed the god of pro wrestling vibe on Kenny, and now you also have Will Ospreay going down. I don't know. I also kind of question just in general why, if Kenny Omega is this much beloved guy, which you would think is, and is really the heart and soul of AEW, right, who has finally returned, why are there no baby faces who come out to help this guy? And when he and Ospreay got jumped last week, why did nobody else come out to help? Where's, like, Mark Briscoe, for example? The Dark Order showed up at different points around the Death Riders thing. Like, where are they at? Like, where are the good guys at? I guess is my point. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this opening segment starts with Kenny saying, like, I hope you enjoyed being considered the number one in the company, but now number one's back, you're number two. Almost a heel promo. Some bass in Kenny Omega's voice. Very serious. I'm sitting there going, ooh, I'm enthralled. This is good. Oh, Shrek, this is great. We can stay up late, so I'm manly. So in the morning, I make the waffles. I felt like Donkey in Shrek. I did. I was loving the start. And then Don Callis' music hits, and then I go, ooh, I don't know. We had something cooking. It leads to the Don Callis family and Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay in an absolute scrap in what is essentially a concession stand brawl to start the show. Not an actual match, but a fight that leads out into the crowd, shows you this unique venue, shows you some really great angles, in fairness, of interacting with the crowd. And they end up behind the stands, which again, if you're going to be booking these smaller venues where everything really does feel unique and it doesn't feel, sterile is not the right word, because sterile would imply that there's not really a good atmosphere to it. But like, instead of it being kind of like the cookie cutter, oh, big arena, none of it really matters because most of them look the same on the inside, right? Or very similar. If you're going to have these unique venues, it's great to get out into the crowd and to show that and give it a unique feel. So they're battling through the concession stand, and eventually Omega and Ospreay kind of have this acknowledgement, right? Ospreay had tried to extend the olive branch. Omega had said no. They team up together to put Lance Archer through a table on a vertical suplex, and you go, ooh, we got something cooking. And then they make their rounds, and then we see Ospreay do almost this like wild parkour move to get up to the railing. He moonsaults. Kenny climbs this stanchion or whatever you want to call it, this column, this open column, and he does a moonsault. Now, the cameras don't exactly catch it perfectly on the first time, which is a little bit of a bummer. But you see that, and the crowd is going apeshit for it, and you say, this is what AEW did best in its infancy. This is what AEW did best coming out of COVID. This is what you expected. This is what made me create prior to this show, and I would appear on other shows. I'd call it the BCD meter, the Buff Chick Dip meter. I would always make buffalo chicken dip for Dynamite because it was worth it. It was like sitting down and watching like the most anticipated thing of the week, right? And I'd say, all right, like this got like a 4 on the BCD. Like it was almost a great show. 5 on the BCD. It's essentially star ratings, right? But like the overall, and I'm not as generous, I guess, with the bowls of Buff Chick Dip as like Dave Meltzer is with the stars. But I would like use that to define whether or not I thought the show was worth watching or not. This took me back to those days where I'm like, yo, this isn't perfect. And I'm sure that like Bischoff and Cornette are going to tear it apart. And I still listen to those guys and I enjoy their shows and I like take everything with a grain of salt. But I know that they're going to have problems with it. But from my vantage point, as somebody who just wants to see AEW like rediscover something about it that made it unique for a long time, I loved this. And you get Omega making the challenge while these two are up there on the stanchion, on the pillar. And they make this challenge to Fletcher. And they make the challenge to Takeshita for a tag team match down under at Grand Slam Australia, which, in fairness, we covered last week. Total mess. Now it's going to be aired on TNT and Max after All-Star Night, which is probably going to be like midnight, 1 o'clock when these guys finally get to the ring, maybe 2 in the morning by the time they get to the ring. Not ideal. Doesn't matter. It kind of matters, but doesn't matter. All of that aside, just from a match perspective, you're going to have this nice show, not a stadium show, but a very nice show in Australia, and you're going to have Ospreay and Omega on one side and Fletcher and Takeshita on the other. That is a must-see match. Doesn't matter if it's a pay-per-view. Doesn't matter if it's a, elevated version of Dynamite, right? A special show. It's going to be a great match. This set the tone for the rest of the show. And again, like I said, the first hour of the show or so, sensational. There were a few other things that I want to get to that happened within this show. There was at one point a rebranding that was very important, and I alluded to it early in the show. We saw a vignette with Julia Hart, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews. And they said that although there has always been a voice, they're ready to come out of the shadows, very clearly saying Malachi Black is gone. I mean, they didn't explicitly say it, but they effectively told you Malachi Black went bye-bye, and now it's just the three of us. Julia Hart had a match against Jamie Hayter in which the lyrics were slightly changed. It's no longer the house always wins, it's the heart always wins, but you still have the really cool effect, the lighting effect on the crowd. You still have, for the most part, the same theme. Her attire has not changed. Everything about it, the presentation is still the same. It's just that one tweak in the lyrics. Brody King, whenever he would come out on his own, right, like just prior to the end of the House of Black, would come out with this aesthetic, right? Not the mask. It was always the ski cap, the full cover thing and the lock and everything, and he's woofing at everybody. Brody King's a scary dude. I don't care if he woofs or not. I'm afraid of the man. If I ever met the guy, I would certainly do whatever it takes to end up on his good side. And then you get Buddy. And all I keep thinking, I said it last week, or I said it 2 weeks ago, it doesn't matter. I've been saying it for a long time. Buddy should absolutely be in a program for one of the titles. I don't think they're never going to they probably aren't going to throw him in a world title program, right? It wouldn't make a lot of sense just given how he's been booked. But you cannot convince me that a match between Takeshita and Buddy Matthews would not be worth the price of admission. That'd be awesome. You want to give me Buddy versus Fletcher? You want to eventually give me like Buddy Ospreay, Buddy Omega? Like, I'm here for it. That dude can keep up, and he's great. Brody King should 100% be in some kind of program for a title. There's one option that very much does intrigue me, and it kind of coincides with a title change that happened on the match. Can you imagine Brody and Buddy versus the new AEW Tag Team Champions, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin? Because I can see a scenario where that could play out, and boy, oh boy, I am 1,000% here for that program. Now, I would want that to be more than a one-off match, but the Hurt Syndicate versus what I believe they're now calling themselves the Hellhounds. Oh yeah, I'm here. Now, apparently they also tried to trademark Cerberus, like the three-headed dog, which would also make sense. That includes Julia Hart. But the Hellhounds, if it's just Brody and Buddy together, fantastic, totally fine. If they were to do that, chef's kiss, I'm here for it. I would like to see those guys involved in singles programs. But if you're going to rebuild the tag team division, right? Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin taking on Lance Archer and Brian Cage. They tried to do the tag team program for a bit. I would be totally fine. I bet that would be a really nice match. That would be a match that gives additional credibility to Lance Archer and Brian Cage and Don Callis family. Maybe they don't win. Maybe through nefarious means, Don Callis tries to help his guys. MVP being an in-ring performer as well. We saw him in the trios match last week. MVP is the guy who ultimately swings the decision, is ultimately the guy who can eliminate Callis and help his guys get the win. But Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin had a wonderful tag team title match. I think, unfortunately, we all kind of knew that the second that the Bucks dropped those titles to Private Party and nothing seemed to really be done with Private Party, you kind of figured they were going to be quick transitional champions. And ultimately, that's what they became, which is a shame because it finally felt like they had their moment. I don't think that the stuff that happened away from the show, where the Bucks said they wanted to actually drop the titles to the Outrunners, did any favors. And it certainly didn't make it feel like the plan had actually been to give Private Party much of a run at all. I thought that was unfortunate. I thought it was very stupidly timed, and I think it ultimately undermined the tag team champions. So to that end, I was disappointed. And at the same time, I've been a very big fan of the Hurt Syndicate, and I think they have been booked marvelously. I have to imagine that some combination of Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, and MVP have had something to do with that. But the match was good. The match could have been a squash, right? After the trios match that we saw last week, Private Party, Mark Briscoe against the full Hurt Syndicate, including MVP, this could have been a squash match. They did not make it into a clearly definitive, embarrassing squash of the tag team champions. They gave some offense to Private Party. It ended up being, some will argue, too competitive of a match. I think it did a good job of not burying Private Party and at the same time establish Shelton and Bobby Lashley as being absolutely dominant tag team champions. I don't know who else in the division is going to give them a run for their money. I have absolutely no idea who you think you're going to build up to be a legitimate challenger for these tag team championships, but I'm here for it. Again, like it comes to mind, Brody and Buddy, that could be good. You could, again, have Archer and Cage. That could be something. FTR, you assume, will be in the mix. The Outrunners, you assume, will be in the mix. I've never understood why the Death Riders have never gone after these tag team championships. Could you see a Claudio and a Yuta go after it? You know how I feel about Yuta. But Claudio and Yuta, could they go after it? Sure. Is Moxley going to try to become a double champion? Highly unlikely. Could Pac and Castagnoli go after the tag titles? That would actually be interesting. Pac and Claudio going after Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin? That could be very interesting. The Hurt Syndicate versus Death Riders is maybe the only thing that could breathe life into that godforsaken storyline around the Death Riders, which I lambasted a week ago, and I will get to probably towards the end of this show. But we're keeping it positive today because I was very happy with pro wrestling this week. That takes me to a combined effort of sorts. We got to hear a Jeff Jarrett promo. That was totally fine. I'm surprised they didn't have him wrestle in front of the Knoxville, Tennessee crowd, just given all the history with his family in Tennessee. I'm a little bit surprised. We eventually get an MJF segment where there's a jobber in the ring, and MJF comes out, tells him to get out of the ring. MJF cuts a promo against Jeff Jarrett. It was what it was. Again, I think they're just trying to reestablish MJF. I'm a big fan of MJF. I'm not exactly sure that it's working right now. Who should come interrupt? None other than Hangman Page, who comes out, has this match, clears MJF of the ring. MJF kind of looks at him. They don't really say much of anything. There's no physicality. MJF leaves. Hangman has this match, wins with a lariat, then after the fact uses the Angel's wings, seemingly establishing the fact that now he has taken that move from Christopher Daniels. He did it in the death match a week ago. He's now done it to this poor soul who ended up on the wrong side of Hangman. And we had a weird moment where Christopher Daniels comes out and he's got the neck brace, and I can't take the neck brace seriously, but okay. And he lays out the case to Hangman where he says, look, the doctors have told me that based on my neck before, based on our match last week, this brutal match against the most violent man in AEW, that is my last match. Clearly defines that was the match that ended his career. Hangman now gets to kind of put on his resume, on his CV, if you'll all cross the pond, that he's the guy who ended Christopher Daniels' career. And it had been established previously that they were friends, prior to Hangman going crazy, that they had been friends. And he essentially looks at Hangman and says, I hope this helps you find happiness. I hope that this ultimately is going to help you be happy. And you see, he walks away, and you see this physical change in Hangman where the body language changes, and he tells the cameraman to get the camera out of his face. And it feels like this is how they're trying to turn Hangman from being this crazy, deranged human being who has sort of played a heel role, and they're trying to turn him back into the good guy, and maybe one of the good guys who will ultimately try to fight for the soul of AEW, which I, again, never want to hear again. But could there be a scenario here where Hangman down the line could team up with Omega and Ospreay as they try to go dispel the Death Riders? I don't know. But unfortunately, I did utter the name of my least favorite part of the show once again, and I will continue from now until the time that it ends. Hopefully not July. Hopefully we're not waiting until Darby Allin gets back from climbing and scaling Mount Everest. But the worst part of the show, by far once again, was the Death Riders. I have nothing truly positive to say. I know that some people think that it's a cop-out and it's just the easy thing to do to poo-poo on the Death Riders, but I genuinely think it is the worst thing they have on the show. And trust me, there are bad things that pop up on AEW's weekly TV. This is by far the worst. Before I get there, I will note one very nice positive. Harley Cameron, hilarious with Tony Storm. Their little Aussie conversation, great. Harley comes out singing with the guitar, sings to Mercedes Moné, and tries to challenge her to a match at Grand Slam Australia. Loved it. Great. She's earning her TV time. Good on her. Back to the negative. This shit. Wheeler Yuta. Again, could Wheeler Yuta kick my ass? Sure he could. Could he kick your ass? Probably. does this look like this? This ain't it. All right? I mean this in a nice way. Seriously. And the guy hails from Philadelphia, so I should be behind Wheeler Yuta, and yet I just don't believe him. I don't believe in him. I think that they have spent a lot of time trying to build this guy up, and I don't think anybody cares. I don't know if he'll ever get there. Maybe he will someday. He looks like an emo kid who put on a fake beard. Like, I'm trying to be fair, and at the same time, I am kind of mocking. But like this looks like a guy who had emo. I mean, shit, he almost looks like my hair. Hold on, No, I'm not emo or anything. All right, here, look, I could do this. I could do the Yuta thing, right? So he's got this hair, and then it's like he went and picked up one of the fake beards at Party City or at like Spirit, was it Spirit of Halloween Spirit, whatever the hell the thing is that like goes into all like the out of business grocery stores and Rite Aids, right? He looks like he went and picked up a beard and he did this. Now look, do I look threatening to you? Hopefully the answer is no. I can't imagine that. But he did this and has the fake beard, right? That doesn't scare anybody. I'm not looking at Wheeler Yuta saying, "Oh, I don't want to cross Wheeler Yuta." I said last week, Powerhouse Hobbs, run into him. I got nothing but nice things to say to Powerhouse Hobbs. Lance Archer, Brian Cage, run into those guys. Nice things to say. Yuta, no. Sorry, Yuta's there. You don't see Claudio. You don't see Pac. One of them might have shown up backstage. It doesn't really matter. Marina Shafir. I don't know why she's not in matches. I don't fully understand that element of it. Everybody else in the Death Riders is in matches, not Marina Shafir. She still looks like a badass. She still could kick anybody's ass. But why is she not in a program right now? Why is she not pursuing the TBS Championship? Why is she not calling out Mercedes? Why is she not calling out Mariah May or Toni Storm? Where is she at? She's not calling out Julia Hart or Jamie Hayter. That part doesn't make sense to me. I digress. Moxley cuts one of the dumbest promos I've ever heard. It makes no sense, and once again, it takes me back to the very simple question. What are we doing here? What is the point? Is there ever going to come a point where I want to know what Jon Moxley's talking about? The dude makes no sense. Once again, Jon Moxley cuts this promo where he says something to the effect of, "There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. We have a big, beautiful future to build. I don't have time for this. I don't have time. There's a future that we're trying to build. Yeah." What future? You still haven't articulated the plan. You still haven't articulated like what any of this is supposed to mean. And in fairness, and I'm going to try to be fair here, it would be great to know what the point is, John. It would be really, honestly, pretty great so that like the people in the locker room could either join your side and say, yes, I too believe that AEW Day One talent should be elevated. Or, no, John, you're crazy, and fight you. No one knows what he's talking about. Not a single soul. No one. I said this, that at the last pay-per-view, like commentary, JR was like, I don't know what his point is. Why is Jon Moxley so worked up? Why is he so upset? And commentary couldn't answer him. Excalibur had no idea. No one knows. So Moxley says this thing about like having to build the future again. No one has any idea what he's talking about. We are going to, I think, remain in a constant state of limbo of not knowing what the hell is going on with this guy. And somehow we're supposed to be okay with it. Okay, fine. I'll allow it. Eventually, later in the show, towards the end, we finally see Moxley and his crew. They attack the Rock and Roll Express. They apparently have FTR tied up. Swell. Very stupid. Not a great end to the show. The Death Riders come out. They surround Copeland. They start beating up Copeland. Switchblade Jay White. Glad he's back. Glad he's around this week. Switchblade comes out, kind of helps to flip the tide in the babyface's favor. It doesn't work. It works for a little bit, and then it doesn't work anymore. It gets a low blow, I believe, is what ended it for him. And then he and Copeland get laid out, and the crowd goes mild. And the crowd eventually just stops caring, goes fully apathetic. They realize no one else is coming out because the same critique, I guess, that I had at the beginning of the show, if we like Omega and Ospreay, and they're good guys in the back, you would think that there'd be people coming to their aid. If you're watching the Death Riders come out and surround Copeland, who apparently is supposed to be a well-liked guy, and you see that the Rock and Roll Express have been attacked and that FTR is tied up, what happened to all the guys who were like ready to meet the Death Riders at the entrance to the arena like a month and a half ago? Where are those people at? All those people who are willing to try to make a human shield, a human barrier to prevent Jon Moxley and his pickup truck from getting into the arena. Where'd they all go? They're gone. Again, that's why this shit hasn't made sense in a month, 2 months. It hasn't really made sense since they essentially killed off Bryan Danielson. It feels like they are trying to wing this thing on the run. Did something change? Like, was somebody supposed to come in? I know that maybe it was never supposed to happen. And maybe a lot of us just kind of hoped. Like, was Shane McMahon supposed to show up here and then ultimately chose not to? Was he supposed to be the higher power and now he's not? Because, like, it just feels like something has been missing. It feels like they were building towards something, toward a big reveal. The big reveal never happened. And now we're just left kind of like questioning. Like, this can't possibly be what these guys thought was going to be the ultimate option, right? They couldn't have actually thought to themselves, this is the kind of program that's going to take this company to new heights. This sucks. There is no redeemable quality right now about the Death Riders. I still don't know what the mission statement is. We're going to build a better future for AEW. What's the future, John? It has been months. You still don't explain it to anyone. There aren't tea leaves to read. No one knows. What was the guy's name? It was John Edwards, not the old VP candidate. The medium. Forget what it is. The other side with John Edwards. We need to like call in that guy, the Long Island medium. We need to call like Miss Cleo 1-900, whatever. Like we need to get like I don't care if any of these drones are actually UAPs, UFOs. But we need to get those. We need to get everybody, get every whistleblower, who's ever existed, get them all together. Can anybody make sense of the storyline? Can somebody like tie Moxley up to a chair? Can they do like the bleach treatment that he was trying to do to Orange Cassidy? Like, can we do that? Like, what is the mission statement? It makes no sense. None of this makes sense. And the biggest shame is you go through this whole show, a lot of great moments, a lot of really strong matches. Also, you had Powerhouse, I thought Powerhouse was going to show up at the end here because you show him in the arena. You would assume that Powerhouse, after losing, kind of getting screwed against Moxley, would be out there and would be defending the others. He's not. He doesn't show up. We're going to get Big Bill versus Powerhouse next week, which is awesome. Love that. But like, why is Hobbs not running out to the ring? Again, there are so many things and so many hoops you have to jump through logically, and you just have to like throw them out the window when it comes to the Death Riders. Most of the other stuff on the show, you can sit back and go, all right, maybe it doesn't make sense that a babyface doesn't come out and help Ospreay and Omega for whatever reason. But the show closing thing, why is this happening? And one other thing that they still haven't explained. Why does the Death Riders group get an entrance theme? Why is Tony Khan or somebody in production hitting the button for the Tron and for the music if this guy has the title in a suitcase, doesn't believe that the company deserves to have its championship display? Why are they doing that? I think that's about where this thing jumped the shark, is when we started getting an entrance theme and a Tron for the Death Riders. All right, so now it feels like I'm ending on a negative note, but there is a positive. Eventually, this shit will end. Eventually, this company will somehow save itself from this mess they've gotten themselves into. Now, if you throw this one final piece of the show aside, it was a really strong Dynamite. And it might have been a big part of why I'm so positive here on a Thursday, because we had a cool segment or two on SmackDown, we had some cool stuff on Monday, and then we had a nice Dynamite show until this shit. I take that as a win. I take that as a week-over-week win. And we will see if next week we find just as much positivity. Because there are a lot of things going on. And we're going to have a lot to react to on next week's show. That includes, but is not limited to, the fact that we've got Cody Rhodes and we have Kevin Owens in a championship match, in a ladder match, at Saturday night's main event. Oh, and by the way, we get Jey Uso and Gunther. Now, I don't think it's going to be a great match. Like, when those two get in the ring, it's not going to matter. I don't think it matters at all. If Jey Uso beats Gunther, I'm going to scream. I want Gunther to have like an actual main event caliber person across from him. Again, no offense to people who like Jey Uso. I just don't get it. I don't see it. I've never understood it. But we'll react to Saturday night's main event. We'll react to SmackDown. We'll react to Raw, Dynamite. And again, if anything else happens, if we get any big changes, any big news about the WWE TNA partnership, anything else that comes to the forefront, we'll break it down on the show. If you haven't done so already, do me a favor, though. I mean, I have this scrolling along the bottom here for those who are watching on YouTube, X, and Facebook. If you like podcasts better, you can find this show in audio form on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. I know on the bottom it says Google Podcasts. I think that's now YouTube Music, something like that. It doesn't really matter. The bigger thing, and this is the thing that actually does help, is if you're over on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. It has the logo. The logo's here in the corner. Subscribe to It's Just Wrestling on YouTube. And do me a favor, like the video, share the video, and subscribe. I know a lot of people say that, but when you like the video, you share the video, even if the person that you're sending it to is never going to watch it, and you subscribe to the channel, it helps. The channel continues to grow, which is a very nice feeling. I would like to see the channel continue to grow. Last week was a nice number, a much higher number than the week before. We're going to keep growing this thing. If you can promise me that you are going to go out of your way to listen or subscribe to the show, and you could tell 2 other people each and every week, it's going to help the show grow. Oh, one thing that actually is an important bit of news or notes. If you are in the general Philadelphia area like myself, there was a good bit of news on the AEW side. Dynasty is going to be at the Liacouras Center at Temple University. I'm thinking I'm going to go see AEW Dynasty at the Liacouras Center because it's the first time that AEW will be running a pay-per-view in Philadelphia. And I think it's going to be a sellout. I do. I think it's going to be a sold-out show, and I think it's going to be an absolutely white-hot crowd, and I'm very excited for it. So if you live in the greater Philadelphia area and you think you're going to go to that show, reach out. Let me know. You can find the show. There are accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Go subscribe there. You can send a message to the show. Let me know. Or you can send me a message directly over on Twitter, @JoyOnBroad, on Instagram, @JoyOnBroad. Otherwise, find the show wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube. And I'll be back next week with an absolutely loaded show here on It's Just Wrestling. Remember, if you get upset this week about anything that happened in pro wrestling, if somebody tells you, it's not that important, or somebody says to you, this is life or death, and you get into an argument with some random person with like a generic-ass profile picture on Twitter, just remember and remind them, hey, it's just wrestling. It's going to be okay. I'll talk to all of you next week here on It's Just Wrestling. Have a great week, everybody. Enjoy your wrestling.